a full wraparound face shield, a pair of safety goggles that have foam gaskets to go around my eyes, and I've got my compact welder's respirator that fits underneath all of this stuff.
Nice.
I tried it all on with my Bluetooth headphones.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. I'm joined by Digital Brand Manager Rob Watzak.
Hey there.
Senior Editor Kiley Jacques.
Hello.
And Producer Jeff Rose.
Howdy.
Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, thanks for joining me, y'all. I got to change the scenery. What do you think?
Where are you, Patrick?
I'm in the coastal redwood forest, Kiley. I decided to get the heck out of Connecticut because it was storming.
You.
I'm actually in Colin Russell's office. I have no power at home since 2:30 Tuesday. For those of you listening, it's 11 o'clock on Friday we're recording, so it's been too many days. Let's just say that. What about you guys? What's been happening with your situation with regard to power and internet capability?
I've been chasing...
Shut up, Rob.
Yeah, right. Rob can't talk. He's just taking videos of the storm like it's a pleasure walk.
So did you lose any trees, Rob, in your landscape?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't lose it in power for very long, but we lost... there's this tree behind my barn that's only about 6 feet from that nice porch I've been talking about for weeks.
Oh, no.
And miraculously... the tree kind of exploded. It lost like half of its branches, and they ended up on all four sides of my barn. And as far as I can tell right now, although I haven't been able to inspect the entire barn because parts of it are covered by branches, it doesn't look like there's any holes or broken framing or anything like that. It just looks like it dented up my brand new sheet metal roof, though.
That's a bummer.
Not bad. It kind of looks like some big muscle guy put a couple of fist punches into the rooftop of it from below. But I feel pretty fortunate because I've been driving around. I put some pictures in the podcast folder, and I was driving around the adjacent towns this week, and I had to, on one 20-minute trip, it took like an hour and a half to get home. I had to go under like a dozen full-size trees that were leaning on power lines, and just sort of slam on the gas to get through there because who knows when these things were going to let go and drop on somebody. But yeah, it's a mess. Connecticut lost almost 800,000 people lost power in Connecticut.
It's crazy.
What's your status, Jeff?
Well, we have no power, no internet. We lost two really nice ornamental pear trees that blocked our driveway.
That's a bummer.
Uprooted them.
Did you try and stand them back up?
No, they were like 25, 30 feet tall. So.
Oh, wow.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Those are significant.
Yeah.
That's a shame.
Yeah, that was a bummer. But, I mean, they're ornamental trees that are not particularly robust anyway. So every winter I expect them to explode. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then just around the corner from our house, trees came down on the power lines, snapped a pole. So that road's closed. And so we'll get power eventually.
Kiley, you got your internet back just recently, right?
I feel so fortunate. I fit somewhere between Rob and you guys. I did lose power for a couple of days, and then internet, and I've been chasing electricity and the internet connection around town, trying to find places to work. But boy, Connecticut is like, why did I move here? Ever since I got here, there's been one. Remember last year we were dealing with those 4 tornadoes that touched down in 3-hour time, and
it never used to be like this, Kiley. I think you must have brought it with you.
It's crazy.
Oh, that's not true.
Actually, my little house, my little 1.5-story house, stick framed. It feels so wimpy. I was scared half to death. I live beneath. I have 4 enormous sycamore trees that I'm dating between. I think 3 of them are about 80 to 90 years old, and one of them's got to be at least 125 years old, judging from their girth. And my house sits right underneath all four of them. And I've had some significant branches come down that take all my might to move. But one of them came down on my roof, and I am so grateful that it didn't do any damage, because it was loud and it was heavy and it scared the dickens out of me. So
I bet.
I feel very vulnerable in this house. I was just glad we didn't get rain enough to make the river flood too, on top of it all. It's just like Armageddon around here, people.
I've just been thinking I need some more adventure. COVID and the economy and all this stuff is really not enough. So I'm grateful to be out of power. I'm looking for more adversity.
Time for locusts and frogs, I think.
There are a lot of people way worse off than us, right? So
For sure.
we should be grateful that we still have jobs and
Exactly.
our houses weren't breached with trees or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a couple neighbors whose cars were squashed. It's weird. Like you said, Kylie, you'd think we live someplace
Connecticut.
different, right? But for the 10 years I've lived here, on average, every other year we have some kind of extended power outage. The shortest one was 4 days, and I think the longest one was 11.
Wow.
I got a new car, and I was quite nervous about. I missed out on almost $700 of trade-in value on my old car because it was dinged up from all these sycamore branches dropping all the time. So I had to find a piece of open sky to park my new car under.
Sounds like we need to build you a carport, Kyle.
I need a carport.
Like a bigger version of your woodshed that you can put your car in.
Right.
That would be awesome.
I know. I've been trying to lobby for one of those at my property. My wife isn't quite on board with it yet, but
Carol said to me, she's like, this was Thursday morning, so we had been out of power for not quite 48 hours, but she's like, do you think Tractor Supply would have a generator? I was like, no, I don't. Forget it.
You want to know what I'm wondering is when we're going to hit the threshold for battery technology to be cheap enough that people just have a battery in their house. Because
but how the heck are you going to run a well pump?
No, but I'm talking about like those Tesla power walls, where you've got several days of battery backup for an entire house. It's not like the old days, like, Martin Holliday's got the 24 or 48 volt system, probably with his solar panels up off the grid in Vermont. But now people can have full 120 volt power, full house systems, and you don't necessarily have to tie them to solar panels. You could just have those things in your house for this particular reason. And
it's very expensive compared to the cost of a generator, of course, but you also don't have the fuel issue.
Yeah. How much does it cost you to run a generator for a full house for a day, though? I mean, you figure.
Yeah. My understanding is they use about a gallon of gas per hour. So
and there's a gas shortage out there, people. Have you guys tried to get gas recently? There's no gas on top of it all.
Because of the power and the trucking.
I'm on empty. I'm not going anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
You can imagine how much more gas is being consumed if people are running their generators for 8 or 12 hours a day, right? Like it's way more than your commute would use. And you're talking about in Newtown alone, thousands of people doing this.
Yeah.
Hey, you guys, why are generators so damn loud?
Because they're inexpensive.
Yeah. You can think about how quiet cars are nowadays. You can barely hear them running. If someone wanted to invest in putting a really nice muffler on a generator, they could certainly do it. Why don't you go to the junkyard, pull one off of an old car maybe, and try to weld it up and stick it on there.
That sounds like a great project for you, Rob. And I would help you.
Okay.
So the answer to your question, Kylie, is they run at very high RPM because they're little motors, and in order to make enough, power, they have to spin fast and loud. And like Rob said, if you put a big muffler on it, that also reduces its horsepower and costs more money. So I was checking this morning, not that I could get one if I wanted it, but for $400 or $600, you could get, a generator that would run my well pump and, the fridge and some lights, and we would be sitting pretty.
So why do people run them all night long? That's what I don't understand. I get the fridge thing. I lost all my food, but why in the heat of summer, and it's not that hot, do you need to run a generator through the night? Why?
Same reason why people freak out, because they can't get their texts and their their Instagram feed when in the middle of one of these storms. It's like we're just accustomed to certain comforts, and I imagine, I don't know how many people have generators big enough to run their air conditioning system, but they certainly want to run their lights and probably their TV.
You could easily run a window unit or a small window unit with even a small generator,
Yep.
It doesn't pull that much wattage.
But I imagine most of those people are probably trying to keep food. I mean, I know so many people that have big chest freezers that they keep, food in, and I don't know.
One thing I observed is we had a full freezer when this happened, and I put a Taylor instant read thermometer in there, and as long as it was full of food, it stayed pretty cold.
Yeah.
When it got to 20 degrees, we decided to unload it all because it was literally hundreds of dollars of food. So we actually put it in the work fridge here.
Well, this kind of ties into like the whole idea of resiliency that we hear people talking more and more about as time goes on. And it's like, you could build, look at those Yeti coolers. Those things are, can hold ice for like a whole week or something like that. And it's not like we don't have the technology to make refrigerators and freezers that will stay colder longer. It's just that it would cost more money to do that. So it's like everything is about a cost per demand kind of
Just
situation.
imagine though, you know how thick a Yeti cooler is, right? And it costs as much as a refrigerator. Your refrigerator would end up like being enormous and have no storage, right? Because the walls would have to be a foot thick.
Yeah, well, it would just build a bigger kitchen.
That's what we do anyway, right, Rob?
Yeah.
I decided I do need to put together a better emergency kit. I was not prepared for this one.
Did you? Do you have a well, Kiley, or do you have city water?
No, I have a well. So
that's the worst part, right?
The worst part.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I take more of the MacGyver approach. I just kind of like, what do I have available to solve the problem at hand? Yeah.
What problem did you have to solve, Mr. Power?
I'm just saying in general, like, I actually it's more that I'm lazy. I do want to put together some kind of a emergency preparedness kit. I've got friends who, what do they call those things? Bug out bags.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have one of those, Patrick, right?
I'm ready to go at any minute, dude.
Yeah.
Look, you made it all the way to the Redwoods.
That's right. So we got some great feedback from Anderson. He says, hello, podcast crew. I've been an avid listener since the early days. Thank you for such great content. I was listening to episode 269 when you were all talking about, is spray foam a good air seal? I think I have the answer for you. I had my garage shop spray foamed about 3 years ago and have yet to cover it up. In many of the stud bays, the spray foam has shrunk away from the stud sometimes as much as 3/16 of an inch. I don't want to rush putting up wall material, and this is a concern for me. The crazy in me is thinking of installing half-inch rigid foam over the studs, taping the seams, and then putting up my wall material. What do you think? See the photos below to show the shop and the spray foam issues. Please don't pay attention to the loose wires in the shop. I'm in the middle of a renovation, and the wires will be cleaned up and run through conduit soon. Well, I was going to challenge you on that, Anderson. I hate messy wires.
You know what I want somebody who's actually doing research on this to tell us is when people see spray foam, we say foam is pulling away from the studs. Well, or is it that, or is the framing shrinking and pulling away from the foam?
That's my guess.
Yeah.
So
it's not necessarily a flaw in the spray foam. It's just a part of the process of.
Well, do you think that we're spray foaming at the wrong period of the construction process, Rob? Is this construction moisture? Is this water is bonded up in the framing that's going to dry out?
Who's going to, except for Robert Riversong, who's going to let a house frame sit for six months until it dries in? Most people are not going to be having the time to dry out their frame to the point where it's. Plus, it also depends on climate conditions too. How humid it is where you are. So I don't see that as being part of a solution to that.
I did a little more digging on this subject because I think I opened a can of worms here, and it is pretty widely accepted that this happens. And I think what's less understood is how much difference does it make in terms of the air tightness of a house? Does it really matter? I would love some data to say for sure.
Well, so this is why sort of a belt and suspenders approach to any of this stuff is probably a good idea. Like Anderson was asking if he should put continuous rigid foam over the. You guys hear that? I feel like there's.
It's a leaf blower outside my
is it?
office.
Of course
Oh,
it is.
okay. I thought you were playing the panpipe or something like that over there.
I thought it was aliens who had a question. They were like, do people actually listen to this?
No, but Anderson was asking if he should cover his entire wall with rigid foam first. I mean, if he's concerned about air sealing, whatever wall surface he's putting up, he can just do an airtight installation, whether it's drywall or plywood. And there's plenty of people who treat the interior wall surface as an air barrier on a house. So even if the foam was intended to be a dominant air barrier, it's probably still doing, I would imagine, a pretty good job covering 99.9% of the surface area. I mean, obviously you don't want those cracks in there. And if he's really worried about that, would you think it would be easier to just go around with some caulk than to put up some or a spray can of foam than to put up a whole sheet of rigid foam as an interior surface?
Well, you know what I would say what to do based on my frugalness. It's going to cost some coin to put up a layer of foam depending on how big his garage is.
Yeah.
And for arguable benefit, right? But if you caulk those gaps, it's going to solve the problem, and it's going to take a while. But
yeah, it won't take the 120 tubes of caulk that last listener.
You need to invite that guy over. Yeah. Well, Anderson had a question, so let's do that too. He says, I have a question as well. Drawer slides are my kryptonite. I've been a carpenter/handyman for the past 10 years, and drawer slides are always a challenge. Do you all have suggestions for drawer slide brands, certain styles that are easy to install? Are there products that make it easier? I've seen Rockler's drawer jig, but I'm always a little skeptical of $20 plastic jigs. Let's talk drawers. Rob, you probably have more experience with this than any of us. Go for it.
Yes, I don't know any professional cabinet shop that I've worked in, and I've worked in a bunch of them over the years. Everybody uses those really nice adjustable Bloom hinges and drawer slides.
It's because of the adjustability, right, Rob?
Yeah, those things you certainly have to install them roughly in the place that you want them to be.
That sounds great.
But they do have a pretty good amount of adjustability. But at the same time, you want to put them where you want to put them. And they do sell proprietary plastic jigs, or you can make your own jigs, or you can just come up with your own measuring system and use blocks of wood or whatever. There's a lot of different ways to approach it depending on the type of installation you're doing. But yeah, I know they seem really pricey, but if I were doing
really pricey. What are they? About $100 a slide, I betcha, or drawer.
Yeah, honestly, I have never priced them. I haven't priced them myself recently, just because I've always been just installing them and not the one in charge of buying them. But yeah, they're going to be several times more expensive than the cheapest slides you can buy somewhere else, like a big box store. But they're just they just work so well. And it's just such a pleasure to have a drawer or a cabinet door with a hinge that's built well, that is going to hold up over time, and that is going to just be comfortable to open and close without grinding.
And if you're doing it for a client, you definitely don't want them to call you a year from now and be like, you know what, my drawer fell off. Can you come fix it for free? And,
I would cheap out on my own drawers maybe if I had to do a whole kitchen in my house, but you got to just pass on the quality to the client, the cost to the quality.
And they will not regret paying for better drawer slides. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
Where's that manufacturer out of?
Is it a German manufacturer?
I thought it was Swiss, but I might be wrong.
German or Swiss? It's imported.
Yeah, BLUM, and it's they make all kinds of crazy hardware too for cabinets to make them. In fact, I even featured in the magazine a couple of issues ago these. They have some crazy stuff. They have like electric servo activated stuff, so you can tap a garbage pail drawer with your knee and the thing will open automatically. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily need that for all of my drawers, but for the trash bin next to the or compost bin next to the sink, when you got your hands all dirty, I think that's not a bad feature.
I agree. I would say make your own jig if you need a jig, and I'd say a jig is the way to go. And I also think Rob's idea of having like pre-cut spacers, if you have a drawer box with a bunch of slides in it, to get them all at the same height, and I do something that they tell you not to do. I usually put them on the box, the cabinet box, and then fasten the drawer to that. And what allows you to do is extend the slides. You clamp them to the side of the drawer, get it where you want, and then run in the screws. And you can't always get to all the screws when it's fully extended, but do what you can just so the thing stays there, and then you can move it around. But I don't think anyone would say there's a magic bullet with regard to installing slides.
Yeah, a lot of it really depends on the specific cabinet and the construction style and size and layout of the cabinet. So it's, some of that sort of trial and error as you get to use them. But
Jeff, do you recall any conversations on the Fine Woodworking podcast, Shop Talk Live, about drawer slide installation?
Not really, no. I can't. I mean, like Mike has talked about doing his kitchen cabinets, but that was mostly about fitting the doors and things like that.
We should, we'll dig into this deeper, and I think that would make a great magazine feature. If any of you are listening out there who are experienced in doing this and think you have a good system, I think a lot of Fine Home Building listeners and readers would be interested in that. This comes from Keiran in Toronto, Canada. I listened to podcast 269 and thought I would share some of my favorite and somewhat unique remodeling/carpentry tools. I was excited to talk about my Japanese cat's paw, but Patrick beat me to it. Rats. In no particular order, these are a few of my favorite hand tools that I wouldn't want to go to work without. Spring Tools Nail Set. This is a fantastic tool. It can be difficult at times to set a nail in tight quarters, especially if you're precariously balanced atop a ladder and you're trying to not only manage a standard nail punch, but also a hammer and your footing on the ladder. This tool works with a spring put between two tapered steel ends. You simply hold one end on the nail you intend to set, pull the other end away from the nail, and release it. It's an absolute pleasure to use. A bonus feature is that you can be used to remove hinge pins from doors. They make one specific for doors, but I find I can use the small end of the nail set, and it works just fine. I've heard other folks say that this is a great tool.
Yeah, I've seen one of those in person. It's such a simple tool. There's like no moving parts. It's just a spring with two tiny nail sets, heavy but small nail sets fastened to each end. You just it's one of those things that you got to be a little careful you don't whack yourself with it when you're pulling that spring back.
That is a cool suggestion, and I've seen folks use it. It is a neat thing. I don't have one. This is one I do have, though, the Windbag Air Wedge, another great tool. These are an easily inflatable reinforced bag that can lift up to 300 pounds. I haven't actually tested mine for capacity. This is based on the website. These are very handy for hanging doors, leveling, installing appliances, installing built-in cabinets, and installing windows. So what this is like a little plastic bag with a blood pressure cuff bulb on it, and you squeeze it up and expands. And if you're installing a big window by yourself, for example, you can put the window in the hole, stick this in there, and it'll hold it while you go around to the other side and fasten it. And as he suggests, it's also good for moving appliances. I found getting like a dolly started under there or whatever.
You want to know one other use for that thing?
Breaking into automobiles, Rob?
Right.
Exactly.
Did you guys have a couple of those in the office at one point?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember those. Okay.
As Rob suggests, these are adapted from the locksmith trade. People use them to spread window glass away from car door frames, so you can slip a Slim Jim in there, or hit the button, what have you. His final suggestion is a right angle drill attachment. This was a great addition to my tool arsenal. Mine is the DeWalt brand. However, there are a few different companies that make them. It can be used with an impact driver or a drill and is great for getting into tight spots when your drill just won't fit. My favorite thing about it is how little space it takes up. I use it often, but not enough to justify buying a right angle drill. All great suggestions, Keiran. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that DeWalt one's a nice one too. It's got a nice weight to it and it's easy to grip. I would recommend it myself.
Do you have this?
Yeah.
I have several right angle drills, so I've never bothered with one, but I did carry one in my toolkit for a long time, but I don't even think it's out of the plastic, so it got the heave-ho. So should we take some questions?
Sure.
Do you have any miracle tools, Rob?
Miracle tools. Oh, I'll come back to you for that one.
TIG welder?
Think about it. TIG welder. Yeah. I was welding up some stuff the other day, and I've got the same MIG welder that I got when I was, I think, a sophomore in college, which was what, 1992.
It still works?
Yeah, still works like the day I bought it. It's
That's
great.
awesome.
So we've talked about the essential craftsman on this show, right?
Mm-hmm.
I watched one of his videos on getting started in welding, and he made the suggestion, Rob, that you should start off learning stick welding, arc welding, as the first process, because he's like, once you learn to MIG weld, you will never want to do any other process. Do you think that's true?
So I took a welding class in college, so I learned all the different processes and stick welding. So the thing about it is stick welding, like some of the more complicated weldings like TIG welding, requires a certain understanding and feel for the process. And you have to get a feel for how you're laying down the metal and what distance you can hold it from the material and how hot it needs to be. Otherwise, it just won't work at all. Where a MIG welder, you can just pull that trigger all day long and make really crappy welds and think you're doing okay. So I could see there's some definite value to that. I mean, MIG welders make it easy to not learn how to weld well.
That's a tongue twister.
He made the point, too, is that you can weld huge material with an arc welder, right? And you can work in any conditions. It can be windy, whereas a gas-shielded welder, like if there's too much breeze, it's not going to weld correctly, correct?
Yeah, in fact, we actually have an article from a couple of years ago. One of Matt Reisinger's guys helped Brian Puntalillo work on it. And I wrote a whole section for that article on choosing the right welder for the job. And the thing about a stick welder is that it's a really simple, bulletproof tool. I mean, it really is just like a transformer and it looks like two jumper cables attached to a transformer, right? It's really simple. And the thing is, the sticks of welding material are coated with flux, and they're made of different metal alloys, and you can get ones for all different applications. Where your MIG welder is usually just set up with one type of metal, one type of gas, and you need clean surfaces to do the right job. But also, the stick welders are like typically the go-to welder for like if you're repairing chassis or tractor parts or
heavy stuff,
structural metal. Yeah, because you can just put down a lot of metal really quickly. Where if you wanted to do the same thing with MIG, you'd need a heavy-duty professional machine like you'd see it usually on the back of the welders' trucks.
It was interesting because MIG does so many things. It was surprising to me to hear him say that, but I think he presented a pretty good case why that was.
Yeah.
Do you have any interest in welding, Kiley?
Yeah, I find it fascinating.
It's cool, right?
It's really interesting. Yeah, I'd love to see you at work at some point, Rob.
For sure. Yeah, well, I told you about the project I'm working on right now, right, Patrick?
Go for it.
Sure.
I had these two old Jeep CJ hoods.
Oh yeah.
And
that was.
And I welded them face to face, so they kind of have this nice oval opening.
It looks like a pita pocket.
Yeah. And I'm actually building an outdoor fireplace out of it.
That's it. What did Matt suggest that was? It was so funny, his idea. It was some big.
I thought he said a pizza oven.
Yeah. If I turn it on its side, it could be a pizza oven. Yeah.
This comes from Jeff in Jamestown, North Carolina. This has nothing to do with air sealing. Sorry. I'm building a shed based on the FHB SketchUp model that Justin created. My gravel just showed up today, so I can probably start the layout and framing the floor next weekend. However, finding pressure-treated lumber has been very difficult. I was wondering if it's possible to do this without PT. I was thinking of using regular lumber, but then covering the rim joist with flashing tape to protect them from splashback. Underneath the floor, I could fasten some exterior plywood and possibly tape the seams, although I'm not sure the tape would be necessary. Putting the sheathing on the underside of the floor will be hard, but I think I could frame the floor in two halves, then flip one upside down on top of the other, attach the plywood, then flip it back onto the blocks. Repeat for the other side. Is this a crazy idea? Thanks, Jeff, Jamestown, North Carolina.
So, okay. I built the roof of my little porch on my deck out of regular framing lumber where it wasn't exposed to the weather. And I built my posts and the rest of the deck that was going to be exposed to the weather out of pressure treated. But I would never put anything close to the ground that was just built out of framing lumber. So if there's a way you could get the shed up off the ground, maybe paint it with some sort of wood preservative,
or even paint.
Yeah, but because in fact there was one of the video series that who was it? Rick Arnold, I think, did a shed video series that's on our website, and they actually painted the underside of the sheathing with some sort of wood preservative, and it was actually, it might even just been some deck stain they had lying around. They're like, you know what, this isn't really necessary, but it's a good sort of extra step just to make the plywood sheathing last a little bit longer. So if it's not like a really big structure that you really care about, I'd be willing to take a chance. But another thing you could even do is, if you live in an area where there are mills locally, try to find a mill that might be milling up some locust, because, you know, old houses like mine used to have locust posts as the posts that held up the main frame of the house, sitting right in the dirt in the basement. So there are more rot resistant woods, or if you're down south, he's in North Carolina, he can probably get cypress. And cypress is a very rot resistant wood. So maybe,
but you have to go to your local sawyer and ask them, right? This is not something you're going to find at the normal lumber yard or the home center.
Yeah, you're going to have to find a local mill that's got this.
Which is going to cost an arm and a leg, right?
No. You want to know what? I built my entire pergola out of white oak and locust that was in my backyard years ago. And it was 17 feet long by 21 feet wide. And I built it for about $500, all out of locally milled wood.
I think that's a great suggestion. I wouldn't be too scared about using regular Douglas fir framing material for this project. You know, like Rob says, you just got to keep it dry, and you're going to have siding that sheds it off the side of the band joist, right? And you're putting the gravel pad down, which is also good because you're creating a capillary break between the soil and the bottom of the shed. And if you could, you know, lift it up a little bit, and as Rob suggests, if you paint it or treat it somehow, it's going to be only better.
Yeah, I would definitely lean more towards getting airspace underneath there than I would worry about covering with another sheet of plywood, because that's just another wood surface that you got close to the ground. So if you keep it so that you can get air and drying underneath there, and use some sort of preservative, that's if you don't have other rot resistant wood available, that's probably the best you can do, and keep it as high off the ground as you can.
I think it's important to remember, until, like, you know, it was in my lifetime that pressure treating really took off for like DIY projects. Of course, those processes were available for, you know, institutional projects and you know, seawalls and that kind of stuff. But, you know, people used to build structures out of dimensional lumber and put them outside because there was no alternative.
Yeah, I mean, my wife is from Southwest Virginia, and if you drive around the back roads down there, you'll find all these old tobacco barns that are made out of chestnut, which is a well-known rot-resistant wood that there's not much of left anymore down there, but they were had it in abundance for years. And there's these tobacco barns that must be 300-400 years old, dotting the landscape down there, that are still standing because they're built out of a good, solid rot-resistant wood.
That's a good question, Jeff. Thank you. And I know there are other folks out there who are trying to build without pressure treated right now. So I think that was timely and a good question. This comes from Jesse. Hi, FHB. I recently started using a paint sprayer for some small DIY projects. I've noticed that through the process of priming and flushing the sprayer, there's excess paint in the bottom of the bucket. While I've gotten better at producing less of this waste, it still seems like there is more paint than should be down a drain. But it might add up to filling a couple of rollers, so is it okay? I can't imagine pros going to the proper facility every time they use their sprayer, but it also doesn't seem right to dump it down the drain. Would it be best to use a drying agent like kitty litter, let it harden and scrape it out with a bucket? Or is it best to just use rollers unless it's a large multi-hour/day project? For example, if I was trying to paint the whole house in a day, the waste would be less than if I were doing a room every couple of days. Any advice on the best environmental or practical solutions would be appreciated. Thanks, Jesse. So I asked Jesse what kind of sprayer he's using and how much hose, because obviously the hose holds a bunch of paint, right? And when you're done painting, you need to get rid of that. And what you can do for a while is spray it back into the paint bucket, right? But at a point, it doesn't work anymore, and you have to start flushing water through it. So, I don't know. If you're bucket you're drawing from in the bottom of the sprayer has paint left in it when you're done, a rubber spatula is a great way to scrape it back into the pan or into the pail. And if you want to be even more frugal with the paint, like take the tip off your spray gun and squirt out the hose as much as you possibly can. And I mean, there's going to be waste. And obviously, it's better to do a bunch of painting than a little painting because the waste is going to be the same. It's what's left in the hose and in the sprayer after you're done. And you're not going to get all of it out always, ever.
I asked Matt about this because he uses a spray. Well, he has one anyway. I don't know how often he uses it, but he did his little shed with it. He says that his little the receptacle that holds the paint, he just turns it upside down. He puts a paint stirrer stick on top of a bucket, turns his thing upside down, goes off and does something else for a half an hour, comes back, and he's salvaged a lot of the paint. Have you guys ever heard of this Enviro wash stations? They're for bigger jobs, but it seems like there should be something for home use too. Have you seen
So it
that?
recaptures the paint waste.
Yeah, I thought it was funny. There's like
Can you tell us about it?
There's 4 different brands that I saw, or like 3, I guess. The Dromont, Trimaco, and Dulux. And essentially,
Trimaco, yeah.
Trimaco. But they are all for bigger projects. This is not, I mean, it says 1 to 2 man operations, but it doesn't sound like something you'd use for home use. But I thought it was kind of interesting. They're all of them plug it as this environmental way to get rid of paint, waste. But each of them has this thing called chemical A and chemical B. So it's a way of separating the water from the paint and to dispose of the paint just by letting it harden and get rid of it. But you have to add these chemicals to the process, and they're not identified from what I could gather. So
That's a trade secret, Kylie.
Exactly. It seems environmentally friendly. Chemical A and chemical B.
Yeah, well, one thing Jesse pointed out is like if somebody's a professional and they're doing this stuff and they got to get their equipment back in the truck, they got to clean their stuff out. But if you're working at home and you got a garage or a shed, you can put your cans in, like you said, Patrick, save as much as you can. You can get a strainer to strain out any gunk that's in there if you're worried about, the paint, especially if we're talking about water-based paints here. And then I know that where I live, the rules are that if you want to get rid of paint, open the can and let it harden in the can. And once it's a solid, it's considered a more inert waste product. So, I mean, I would say
it takes forever though.
No, I know. That's why I say you'd want to recover as much as you can. And then whatever's left in there, scrape into, whatever you can, scrape into a bucket that's a wide open top bucket that you could put in a shed and let it dry out. And
it seems like part of this too is to consider the paint itself, right? What are you painting with? I mean, if you really care, then there are, I came across some more environmentally friendly paints, Real Milk Paint Company. There's a number of paints that even Sherwin-Williams, has a couple of lines that are less toxic. So
it's true, Jesse. A sprayer is going to waste more paint. And if you have a small project, a roller is a much less wasteful way to paint and a brush. It's interesting. This came up in a different context for me. I was having some training on Graco sprayers at one point, and I don't know exactly what this was about. I think I was talking to someone at a trade show. And I was asking about the systems that use a airless sprayer and a hose, and there's a roller on the end of it, and it draws paint through the hose to the roller head, so you never have to load the roller as you're painting. It's constantly being fed there. There's a trigger, and you can load up the paint while you're doing it. And this seemed to me like a great idea, and I asked about it. I was like, this seems like a way to paint very efficiently in an occupied space, which is something you can't do with a sprayer, right? You need to get everything out of there. You have to mask everything. So the Graco rep told me, he's like, well, it is, but you're going to waste 2 gallons of paint every time you use this because you have to fill the hose, you have to fill the tube that the roller's on, and you have to fill the roller head. And once you're done painting, you can't recover that. You might be able to get it out of the hose, but there's just a lot of waste. So that's why you don't see those things very often. So.
Yeah, but if you're painting like a whole office building and you're paying your guys, 30, 40 bucks an hour or whatever, wasting a couple of gallons of paint for the
Is
time
not the problem.
is not the problem.
Good question.
Without a real answer.
There's no real answer. You're going to waste paint, and you just try and waste as little as possible. I said instead of dumping it down the drain, mix some kitty litter in and put it in the trash. You know, let the kitty litter absorb the paint, and then you can dispose of it properly. Jeff, do you have a sprayer?
No, I don't.
Do you want one?
I would, yeah.
Is Graco listening?
Well, I'm still trying to decide, Patrick, whether I'm going to paint my kitchen cabinets by hand or spray them, because I'm not pulling them out. So it's got to be something I can do in place. So what would you do?
Rob, I would be really tempted to get what Matt did, which is that Wagner kind of consumer grade paint sprayer, because from what I've seen, it works great, and it's like less than $100, I want to say, or maybe a little more. But
you're talking about one of those ones with the plastic bucket and the plastic gun.
Yeah.
I actually have one of those. I just didn't know if that was of the precision and quality that I'd get a nice paint job on a kitchen cabinet, though. What do you think?
Matt's used his inside for inside projects, right?
Well, I don't know if he sprayed inside, but he definitely sprayed cabinets that were for inside.
Well, that's what I mean.
So our next question comes from Brian. He says, hello, Air Ceiling Podcast. I hope all is well. I'm refinishing about half my basement in my 1956 Cape in Portland, Maine. I'm developing the insulation plan for the walls, but I'm at a loss for the basement ceiling / first floor. In the original finish, it was a mix of fiberglass, drop ceiling, and stapled fiberglass tiles that left only about 6'2" of ceiling height. And for future planning purposes, there is a good chance my father, who is 6 foot, and my 4'11" mother will be residing there at some point in the not-so-distant future. My conundrum is balancing access to electrical / plumbing and sound reduction. It has board sheathing under hardwood floors with the height restriction. I originally intended to double up on fire-rated 5/8" drywall for optimal sound reduction, but I'm now worried about access in the future, but I'm also worried about losing 3 to 4 inches in height to a new drop ceiling. My plumbing and electrical runs are fairly concentrated in a few areas. I'm wondering if there is a detail you've seen or used that would allow access when needed but won't be a huge sound penalty. Is there a good workaround, or am I just delaying the inevitable drop ceiling? Or should I just hope my dad shrinks another inch? He was 6'2" at one point, before they eventually reside in my subterranean lair. Well, that sounds appealing, Brian. I couldn't wait to move in if I was your dad. Put up drywall, Brian. People get so uptight about like electrical runs and plumbing runs and future access in their basement ceiling. But frankly, you don't have to do that very often. And if you have a plumbing leak, it's immediately apparent where it is. And if you have to add electrical circuits or change them, like you'd cut holes. Or if you have leaky pipes, you cut holes. It's so easy to fix drywall. And the access panels are going to be a huge hit in your sound attenuation. So, I mean...
Yeah, not only that, but the amount of extra work you would do to gain access and the sacrifices you would make would add up to way more than the hassle of cutting some holes in drywall in the future.
I would love to hear, did you guys catch BS and Beer last night, the show?
No. Tell us about it.
Ted Benson was on, and he was. I would love to hear his take on what you guys are suggesting, because of his whole idea of this, how does he phrase it? Disentangling the mechanical systems from the structure, but he has a whole system for this application for how to access. It's essentially a drop ceiling. They developed what they call a grip T system, which allows the ceiling to be hung from I-joists using special hangers and wooden T-bars. But I'll put a link up to the show, because it was really fascinating. And this guy, though he probably wouldn't do anything of the sort, might be interested in it because it would apply to a situation such as what he's describing. But I don't know about the soundproofing qualities. He didn't get into that, but it's just fascinating stuff. But I don't think he would suggest what you guys are suggesting.
Well, it is true.
He has more money than us. That's what I'll say.
I totally get it. But there might be some application, if he does a little digging, he might be able to find something that would be applicable. I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Ted Benson that it is pretty silly sometimes how entwined our mechanical systems are with our houses. And a lot of that has to do with just houses that were never... we still build houses in a way that was kind of never intended to have stuff in the walls. Mm-hmm. And and it's just also planning. Like Ted Benson and all his work, they design the houses around the mechanical access. So, they have these cores where everything's pre-built, and it's almost like you're putting the motherboard in a computer. It just pops right in there,
Yeah,
and really I got to think that process was at least partly developed because of the modular nature of their home construction, right? You have to be able to connect these modules when it gets to the building site. And so all the pieces have to line up. It's like,
my understanding,
you have to have that figured out.
Yeah. But he's also thinking in terms of longevity of each aspect. He divides a home into 6 different, the 6 S's, and I don't have them in front of me, but essentially it's like the structure, the skin, the, I can't remember what they all are, but essentially it's like each of those components has a different lifespan, and to plan accordingly. So the shell, as the longest standing, it should last, like, I think it was like 300 to 400 years or something. So, it's just an interesting concept. I mean, he's making it work. But
his houses are very smartly designed.
Yes,
like, who could argue that?
To look at,
but
too.
you pay for that.
Of course.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're talking custom homes here. I mean, it's like, I think a lot, I could be wrong, but I think a lot of his company's thinking on these situations started with timber frames, because timber frames are notoriously difficult to run
mechanicals in. Yeah.
So they started doing open web trusses to run all their duct and plumbing work and electrical work, so you never have to cut a single hole in a joist. And then they were building, timber frames typically have exposed tongue and groove floor sheathing that you can see from the ground floor for the second floor, just because they don't have drywall ceilings. The point is they're exposing all this beautiful wood. And I think they're the first generation of Ted Benson's ideas with this mechanical access was basically these sort of fancy drop ceilings made to look like those tongue and groove floors.
Yeah, exactly.
And there are attractive drop ceilings out there. I mean, there's some that mimic. They don't look exactly like tin ceilings, but you can get some that have look like coffered ceilings and tin ceilings. But then again, you're also losing some height there.
And they're notoriously noisy. They don't do much to stop sound transmission. Right. So
which is his issue.
This comes from Jean Charles. Hello to everyone. Your program is my constant companion as I rebuild what I consider to be the very first McMansion, dating from the 1700s.
Wow, that's quite a claim.
Help. I work mostly by myself. The roof is steep, 60 degrees. The siding, gutters, and roof all need work. What is a safe set of gear to get the job done? Buy, rent, scaffolding, ladder jacks, homemade? The gear has to be light enough for a one-man setup. What would you choose? I have commercial/flat roofing experience, just not 60 degrees. Thanks for your great program. I'd say sell the house, John Charles.
Okay, Matt.
Well, first off, we just had that article on fall protection, so you should certainly take a look in there. But you know what? A lot of those choices really depend on the access that
where you are on the roof, right?
Yeah, and also what type of siding, what kind of project you're working on. Like, for instance, I've thought about either renting a scissor lift, renting or buying scaffolding, or using pump jacks if I ever end up redoing the siding on the north side of my house. It's a 40-foot tall wall, and I'm thinking, you know what? I think from an accessibility and affordability standpoint, I would probably go with pump jacks, because you're always at the correct working height for each course of siding that you're working on. I mean, scaffolding's nice, but it's heavy and it's kind of scary to put up if you don't have help.
How do you put up pump jack poles by yourself, though, Rob?
How do I put up? I don't know. Climb up on the roof.
It's not easy, right?
No.
You're going to need at least some help to put up pump jack poles.
Sure. But I was talking about more about the working conditions during, use. Certainly everyone would love to have a scissor lift or some other hydraulic, machine, but those things are pricey.
Seems like homemade is not a good idea.
Never.
No. But have you ever seen those pictures of scaffoldings on skyscrapers in Asia where they're all made of
Thai bamboo.
Yeah.
bamboo lashed together. They're working 50 stories up. I mean, what's wrong
I
with
feel like Matt builds scaffolding for himself quite a bit.
I did too on my barn. You know, like if you have employees, you're absolutely not allowed to do
Yeah.
that. But you know, like if it's your house working on by yourself, like you get to decide what's right for you.
Yeah, I've worked with framers who used to actually use some of the framing lumber to build scaffolding as they were building the walls, and then
Just
they
take it
pull
apart
it
and
apart when it's time to frame the roof. Yeah,
That's kind of clever.
One thing I like for a roof work that is easy to use for one person is what's called a chicken ladder. And it's this lightweight metal ladder. The rungs are arranged so they're spaced off the roof so you can actually get your foot on them, not just your toe. The other way to do that is with a ridge hook and a conventional ladder. This thing clamps onto the top of the ladder and you hang it from the ridge. The problem is the rung is like an inch away from the roof sheathing, so it ends up being very uncomfortable after a point because you don't have enough room to get your whole foot on there. Chicken ladder is lighter and allows you to do this, but you have to have a sturdy ridge, and it has to be arranged so that you can put the hook over it. So, for example, if you had a mansard roof with very steep sides but a relatively flat top, it's not going to work because there's not enough, the roof isn't shaped correctly for the hook to grab it.
yeah.
I love pipe staging. Pipe staging I find you can put up by yourself too. It's not easy. It's not fun, but you can definitely do it because the pieces are relatively small compared to other methods. I like pump jacks too, especially when you're siding, because you can keep raising the thing as you need to go up the wall.
Yeah. If you're gonna go the scaffolding route, you know, you and me, I'm on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace all the time, and you can find professional, good quality scaffolding on a regular basis for a way cheaper than you would pay new if you keep your eyes out on
And you can rent it too, but it's expensive. You know.
Do you guys always tie off when you're doing high work like that?
Who's asking, Kylie?
I.
So
Of
I
course.
don't do high work.
40 feet? That's high.
No, I don't go up there. I'm saying if I ever get around to it. No, so yeah. The more I think about it, the older I get, the more experience I get, the more I am concerned with safety. I mean, you know, it was pretty normal when I was younger to never see anybody on job sites with any kind of safety equipment or even railings or anything like that on scaffolding.
If you showed up to a residential job site with your fall arrest system, like in the 80s or 90s, you know, the Lifeline, people would they would ride you relentlessly for the rest of your life. They would just be like, what kind of prima donna are you that you are not going to fall off the roof?
Yep. And nowadays there are so many different solutions too. There's so much different kinds of hardware. Like there are permanent D-rings or clips that you can mount discreetly near roofs for future work. There's
That's cool.
there's sort of minimally invasive stuff that if you have to cut in and bolt around the like the ridge beam. There's there's so much different kinds of choices. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if some of that stuff evolved from rock climbing equipment, you know?
It should, because like that stuff was functional. The early like fall arrest stuff, I had a set in the early 90s. It was terrible. It was just uncomfortable and hot, and it didn't fit you right. It was just bad. It's gotten a lot better.
Didn't you recently get some new gear, Patrick?
I did for photo shoots.
Yeah.
So the last high work I did was my barn roof, and to be honest, no, I was never tied off for any of it. But, you know,
What do you guys?
I would take it more seriously now.
I was going to say you're pushing 50. I think you should start thinking about it.
So you guys might not know this. Yesterday, I recorded a Pro Talk podcast with Dr. Arthur Henderson, who is a carpenter with an emergency medicine hobby, is how I would describe him.
What does that mean?
He's an ER doctor, but for his entire life, he's been working on houses.
Cool.
He added a level to his parents' house when he was still in high school. He seems to know all the trades: plumbing, electrical work, carpentry, finished carpentry. And I asked him, I was like, so have you changed your methods since you became an ER doc? And he said, yeah, I absolutely have. You know, he has a saw stop. He has fall arrest gear that he wears. And it's all because of the things he's seen.
Please, yeah.
Eye injuries. He says my solution for preventing eye injuries now is just to buy dozens of pairs of safety glasses and put them everywhere. And that way you always have them. And it was a great conversation. I don't know if this show will air before or after his, but it's totally worth listening to if you don't normally tune into the Pro Talk podcast.
I'm amazed at how many people don't think about the potential for eye injuries. Like there's some, yeah. No, but seriously, you go into any job site or shop, and there's always plenty of guys who like they might wear their safety glasses when they're doing certain things they think are particularly dangerous. But all it takes is one nail that glances off of your framing hammer, you know. And like I actually just got in the
it doesn't even have to be that serious, Rob. Just get a piece of rust in there.
Yeah.
And you have to go to the ER to get it out because it can be very dangerous, right? And at a minimum, you're going to spend a ton of money and waste a bunch of time.
Yep.
At the worst case, you lose your eye, right? You know, it's the stakes are very high.
There's all the pain in between too.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a picture of myself later on and I'll send it to you guys. I just got in the mail yesterday a full wraparound face shield, a pair of safety goggles that have foam gaskets that go around my eyes, and I've got my compact welder's respirator that fits underneath all of this stuff.
Nice.
I tried it all on with my Bluetooth headphones because I obviously have to listen to music while I'm working in the metal shop.
And you're ready to go to the grocery store.
I kind of look like a stormtrooper.
Did you get all that for welding?
Yeah, when I was out on that metal project the other day, I'm like, no, I'm taking way too many risks here. I gotta get the protection I need.
Good.
At a minimum, it's just such a hassle to go to the ER, even in like normal times. You can imagine what it's like now, right? And there are really sick people there all the time, and you might come back with something worse than your eye injury, right? It's keep yourself safe, folks.
Yes.
I don't know if we helped John Charles at all.
Okay, what's the short list? So read the fall protection article in 293. And just keep an eye out on Facebook. Maybe even talk to some local builders and see what they like, and get some tips from people you know.
If you have to use pump jacks because of either space constraints between your house and the next, and this was a common scenario when I was building in the city of Pittsburgh because the homes are often like a few feet apart. If you have to use pump jacks, get yourself the Aluma pole or buy them used, even better. They do shake out occasionally, and they are so superior to the wood ones. And then when you're done with it, you'll be able to sell them in 15 minutes on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist because they are just so much better than everything else out there.
That's a good point. If you buy good equipment like that and you're only going to use it on a few jobs, it's the kind of stuff that doesn't come up for sale that often, so it still retains its value. So it'll be cheaper than renting it probably if you bought it and resold it.
If it's for any duration, and if you're doing a siding or roofing project by yourself, it's going to take a long time. It's definitely cheaper because the rental rates are high.
That's smart.
Jeff, do you have anything to add to this conversation?
No, fall protection is definitely a good thing.
I agree. It's, Dr. Art was telling us about a guy who came into their ER last week with 2 broken ankles when he fell off his roof.
How'd you get that guy on there? How did you?
Didn't he write into the podcast?
Yeah, he sounds familiar to me.
I think he sent an email to the FHB editorial inbox.
About eye injuries, right? Was that him?
No, it was about this. It's called a dashboard. It is this setup for making cuts with your track saw. And it allows you to cut panel products very efficiently. Go ahead, Rob.
That's right. Do
you want to explain it?
He was talking about how, over the years he's used different, like those Craig jig tables and other manufactured workbenches, made plenty of his own workbenches. But he was saying, this thing may sound expensive. It was like $1,200 or $1,400, but it was this really sturdy, compact, very adaptable, with like those extruded aluminum slotted pieces. You can attach all kinds of jigs to it, little hooks so you can capture doors and cabinets when you're planing edges. It was way more adaptable than anything I've ever seen that you could buy. And you would see in a cabinet shop, people would typically make jigs out of scraps of wood that would do the same thing. but it would take you a heck of a lot more time and be less sturdy than this thing was. So, I mean, I'd love to see the thing in person because it sounded really cool.
So he sent in this review, and it was well written and reasoned. And in the editorial world of home building, this is gold. This like never happens. This was unsolicited. We used to say it was over the transom submission, right? It was like in the old days, it was like someone threw it into your office over the door, right? And so I emailed him back. I'm like, this is a very expensive tool and kind of niche. Are you a professional carpenter? And he wrote back this very well-written response, giving me his life's history and explaining how he was a lifelong builder, but also an ER doctor. And so I was like, I absolutely have to talk to this guy in the podcast about all the gory things he's seen in the ER. And it was fun. I really enjoyed it. I think it's one of the better ones.
When we publish that episode, are we going to have to put like a warning on the front, like this is graphic content?
It wasn't too gross. Do you think, Jeff?
No, it was more statistical than it was descriptive.
Cool.
He told us that 3 people, was it a month, come in with table saw injuries, right,
Okay.
Jeff?
Yeah, and it's a small hospital, rural hospital.
One rural hospital in the country has 3 table saw injuries every month. So if you do the math, what did he say, 30,000, Jeff?
Oh my God.
Something like that. I can't. There were a bunch of numbers flying around. I don't remember exactly.
It's right up there with bagel cuts on Sunday mornings.
Yeah.
He was also saying that there's probably a good chance that many of the injuries are misreported or unreported regarding circular saw injuries, right? Because
there's so many
just a
guys.
laceration.
Yeah.
I know so many guys that just get out some bandages or some crazy glue, and they would never go to the hospital with something like that, you know?
It was great. Thanks, Dr. Art. And we are going to put the dashboard review in the magazine too.
Oh yeah, cool.
When are you getting one shipped to the office so I can try it out, Patrick?
I haven't asked for one because Dr. Art did the whole thing.
That's not like you.
You still have to photograph it though, don't you? Or,
I need one.
I have enough tools. I really do. Like I used
Shut
I
your
used
mouth,
to get really
Patrick.
excited about new tools, and now I'm like, oh my God, where am I going to put this other thing?
Especially since your office is now in your wood shop, right?
Right?
You need a bigger barn.
I do not need a bigger barn.
That's the answer to all
I
problems.
need fewer family members.
I need a fun end note. Do you have anything funny to share with us for the end note, Patrick?
No, you got anything?
I was relying on you for a laugh.
I don't know. We could put that picture of that house I sent you earlier on the end note, Patrick.
Oh, talk about that, Rob.
I got to go interview this person because I was driving around and I had to take a detour because of all the trees down. And I'm driving down the road and I'm like, what the heck is that? I see this odd little house and the entire roof of the house is shingled with asphalt shingles in something like 5 different colors, maybe 6 different
But the
colors.
cool part is I've seen that done with like patches, but this kind of looked like it was arranged in stripes or rainbow kind of pattern. It was
it was almost like a chevron. It was like the roof was like a chevron pattern or something. But then as soon as I noticed it, it was this sort of farm compound with these little barns and houses all over the place, and every single building had the same kind of thing done to it, except in different colors and patterns. Like some seem more random than others. And I'm wondering if this guy just knew a roofer who just dropped off his leftover shingles every time he was done with a job, and he just pieced them together in these cool patterns. It was really kind of neat.
I know when I used to work at Rice Lumber, we would, you end up with inventory that's not enough for a roof job, right? And so we would sell those for like $10 a bundle. And oftentimes it was farmers doing outbuildings, right? Because they didn't care. It is like wanted to keep the water out of their chickens. Like, so doesn't matter.
Sure.
So it's either the roofer is, dropping off his excess stock, or they know someone at the supply house who's selling them shingles that are leftovers cheap.
Well, I will tell you one thing, Patrick, that no one would probably have ever known if I didn't mention this, but that porch roof over my my little back deck of my barn.
Yeah.
From down below, it's all the same galvanized steel, but some of those panels had been painted over the years for different reasons. You can't see it from the ground, so I'm the only one who would ever know, but there's different colored roof panels all over the top of that thing.
Cool. So when I fly over in my float plane, I'm going to notice, but no, otherwise I'm never going to be able to see that.
Exactly. Oh, you know what? I know someone with a plane who flies over regularly. I should take a picture.
I was just talking with an architect who ordered all of these tiles for backsplash in the kitchen, and unbeknownst to her, they came in different quantities. That's just how they ship them. And she had to subsequently develop this entire pattern around the fact that she had different quantities of the different patterns. You know what I'm saying? So,
it's like it's a math equation. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. To make it make sense.
Nice.
I would be annoyed to learn that, I got to say.
So it took many, many hours.
Yeah. Some of the best creative choices happen because of mistakes like that,
It's true. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. Thanks to Kiley, Rob, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com, and please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Thanks for listening, and happy building.